Welcome to Performance Anxiety. This show features guitarist Nick Kizirnis. His new album, The Distance, is a bit of a departure from the surf and rockabilly sound he's honed throughout his career. It's a study in sadness, but in a Graham Parsons meets Roy Orbison kind of way. He's joined by some great folks, too, like Mark Patterson of Sun Volt and Kate Wakefield of Lung. There's a lot more to this episode than just an album review. Nick also plays with Theramin, plays with the Mulchmen, Nicky K Orchestra, and more. And he's been mixing music genres for years. Check out his social media accounts for more info on all that. Pick up his album, The Distance, on Atom Records, on Bandcamp, or wherever you buy music these days. And I hope you enjoy this episode with Nick Kizirnis.
Hi, everyone. This is Nick Kizirnis. My new record's called The Distance, and it's on Atom Records. You're listening to Performance Anxiety Podcast with Mark Shea. I nailed it. I never nail it. I did it. I'm not giving you anything else. I really appreciate you having me on. I think the show is great.
Oh, thank you.
And I was so thrilled. I have to say, I was so thrilled to hear the David Schramm article or interview because I don't hear much from him. And I've been a fan of his since I was on a compilation album with him in 1989. I was a kid, and it was an early Schramm song. And I was so impressed, and I followed him for years. I finally met him a few years ago and scared him because I was like, oh, but he's friends with a couple of friends of mine. I mean, we're in Dayton. They were in Columbus.
Yeah.
You know, Ron was in Columbus and stuff. So, but love them so much. Love his guitar playing and his songwriting.
I didn't know too much about him before his PR folks reached out to me and like, hey, David's coming out with a new album, new Schramm's album. You want to have him on? I'm like, sure. I don't, even if I'm not familiar with an artist or a musical genre. Yeah, I'll have you on because I like to learn about new people.
Yeah, give it a try.
Yeah, new music. So I was like, yeah, sure. And then in studying, I realized I found out he was in Yo La Tango, and some of that Schramm stuff is just brilliant. I mean, I know. I absolutely love it.
I love it. Love that stuff. So cool.
So how did you get into music? I mean, were you playing as a kid? Did you have a musical family? How did you actually get started playing?
So my mom is actually a music teacher, and I started, my sister was playing piano when we were kids, and I just couldn't figure it out. but eventually in junior high, you got to try the guitar class, and so I picked up the guitar. I had been listening to music for years. I had started probably with what was on the radio and classic rock, and Pink Floyd was a big one, and loved to listen to all the weird Pink Floyd. So I was like, oh, this would be interesting to
like metal.
To try the guitar. I love that record. That was at the top of my list.
And Echoes is just insane.
Yes, absolutely. I was in a band that covered that.
Wow.
So yeah, it was so much fun. And we had a recording that we played in the middle that had the type of bird sounds that David Gilmour did and all that. But it was, but I started and I never stopped. It was like within a year or so, I was in my first band. And, by the time we were 15, we were playing in like the main club in Dayton, Canal Street Tavern. And we were playing with all the bands that came through. And there was Jim Carter was a DJ and promoter, and he was bringing bands like Camper Van Beethoven the True Believers, and so we were getting to play with these different bands. And then he helped us put a record out. And so by the time we were seniors in high school, we had recorded a record, and we got a lot of help from a lot of the friends that he had on the East Coast, which included people like the Shrams and Human Switchboard and things like that. So we were, senior year of high school, we went out to New York City and played CBGBs,
which band was this?
In the Middle East. It was a band called The Obvious. So it was, I would say, a very Ramones and Replacements influenced punk rock and roll band. and it was with John Dubuck, who is this fantastic songwriter. He's really very much of a actually John Prine influenced songwriter now. Yeah, and he does some really great Prine covers, and he has a band now called the Guilty Pleasures. Oh, cool. So, but back then we were just young, rock and roll band. And so I went through a series of bands. They were always different styles, shifting back and forth from, maybe what we would call, college rock or indie rock to more progressive. And then finally started even getting into playing surf instrumentals and spy themes, and then rockabilly music, and just really it's been just trying a lot of different things has probably been the consistent thing, and trying to do different things with records and playing and all of that. Yeah, so that's my brief history, right there.
And so you're heavily influenced by classic rock and all. And one of the things that this show does is I kind of bounce around just because I take notes in my research, and not everything goes in chronological order.
Sure, that's fine.
I'm trying to look at my notes, and all, I may go back and forth on a bunch of things. Just as a warning to you and listeners who may be listening for the first time. So this is not exactly a chronological show, but so I heard. Actually, I saw a video of you in the Mulchmen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where did you start playing theremin?
Let's see. Let me think about that. So, you mentioned classic rock as an influence. Actually, the first music that influenced me was early country, Johnny Cash, Hank Williams, and then music like Duane Eddy. Yeah. And so later I started hearing classic rock, which introduced me to this, like a lot of like the progressive type of things that Pink Floyd did, and, and Led Zeppelin, The Doors, just sort of like the mixing it up. But it was punk rock that actually that got me into being in a band. I was oh yeah, now I got it. So later, after I'd been in a few bands, I heard about the theremin. It wasn't actually from Led Zeppelin, believe it or not. I kind of missed that for some reason. But there were some, I came across a couple different performers that were using it, and I was just fascinated with it.
Okay.
And so I didn't know what to do with it until I formed this band, the Mulchmen, which was this trio that played, surf instrumentals, and we wanted to do spy themes. And then we also didn't want to just be traditional. We wanted to get, because we all had the background in punk rock and all those things. Yeah. So we're like, let's see how we can mix it up. And so we brought in the theremin. We did a Link Wray cover with theremin, and people responded to it really well. So I ended up writing a couple other songs that were more like horror theme and kind of things like that. And as a result, went back into the history of the theremin, and just to kind of learn. I mean, it's really hard to play. I'll tell you that.
I wanted to ask you about that. Yeah.
I mean, I've learned some things, but I do find it's a real challenge to keep it consistent. And so what I try to do is I try to have a lot of fun with it.
Okay.
And that's worked really well in the sort of the rock band setting. I do use it on recordings, and it's a little more controlled and mysterious. And then live, as you've seen, you saw the video. So it gets a little wilder, and and I think people get a kick out of it. It's you don't know quite what's going to happen sometimes with it. So it's fun.
A little bit of a surprise for you and the audience at that point.
Yeah. It's been really great, and I've used it a lot for the past few years. And I didn't on this new record, but but it's funny. It just shows up in all sorts of places.
I was watching that video of you with the Mulchmen on the Link Wray cover. Was it Rumble 3000 or?
Yeah, we called it Rumble 3000. So yeah.
That was so cool. The way
Thank you. Thanks.
You're playing it, and then you go back to playing the guitar, and then you incorporate the two at the same time, and it was just insane. I absolutely loved it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, we had a lot of fun with that. And what's really fun is that the other guys in the band will play off that as well. And we'll mix it up. I mean, and it's fun to do. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh gosh. It's so cool. Now I'm going to tell everybody to go check it out. Check out the Mulchmen. I think it's the Mulchmen at the Drive-In is what the video is titled.
Yep. And there's a few. If you search my name, Nick Kizirnis, or you search the Mulchmen, I think there's like 3 clips of us playing that song. So and they're literally all a little bit different. And then the first Mulchmen record. It's called Louder Than Dirt, Thicker Than Mud. Yes. And that one is still out there and available. Actually, we're working on trying to get it on Bandcamp right now.
Oh, cool.
And that has the studio version of it as well. And that was fun.
Oh,
those are definitely really fun.
After the Mulchmen, you ended up playing with, and I don't know if this after, I guess maybe everything's congruous. I don't know. Everything's happening at the same time. You got the Mulchmen, Tobin Sprouts, Eisenweasel. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
That was right, yeah. Eisenweasel.
Nicky Cage's orchestra, Cage. So you've been doing all kinds of music. You've got, because I was listening to some of the orchestra stuff, Nicky Cage orchestra. And that's really cool. That's like really super exotic surf music. It's really wild stuff.
Yeah, that was actually so the Mulchmen was earlier, and I had started writing some more instrumentals and wanted to record them. And so instead of having a trio like the Mulchmen, it was a 7-piece band, right?
Wow.
And it was Jim McPherson from the Breeders was in it, and he and I had played together before he had joined the Breeders, years before. And so we got together and worked on this whole thing. And it was really fun to have, 2 keyboard players, 2 guitar players. We had a violin player and play these things that weren't really surf music. They were like a mixture of exotica and spy and surf. Yeah. So, and it's sort of, it's like everything I've kind of done has just been trying different things and evolving and bringing in different people and trying to collaborate whenever those ideas come up. And that's been how it's always been, even up into the new album. It was like that as well. So
there's a gap between your last album and then the new album, The Distance. It was about like a 5-year gap.
Yes, there was. So around the time I did the record, the orchestra record, I started playing with Paige Beller, and Paige is a songwriter here in Dayton, Ohio. She's an amazing songwriter, and writes these like very sad songs that are just really gripping.
Okay.
And so she started sharing them with me, and I had the opportunity to play guitar with her and record some of those songs that came out later. And working with her, since I had been inspired, like playing instrumentals for a little while, working with her actually really inspired me to kind of try my hand at writing songs, which I hadn't done in years.
Okay.
Like going back to when I played in Cage and when I played with Tobin. And so the reason 5 years is partially because I was playing with Paige, but then also I just focused on that. And it was a long process to actually write it and then record it with everybody, because there were different people who were working with me on it. And so, I mean, it was worth it. I just decided it was time to kind of, let's just work on this, and however long it takes, that's what it's going to take.
Now, when you started writing it, you hadn't put together the band that was going to end up playing this? Had you were you writing more for yourself, or?
So I started writing for myself, and I had a number of ideas that I was really excited about.
Okay.
But the songs, like, I couldn't finish them, and the reason that was, I realized I couldn't finish them because I was writing them for my voice. I was so used to just playing guitar and singing for so many years, and it was really limiting. These songs, like, it just wasn't working. And so I thought, well, what if I was just someone's songwriter? What if I just wrote these songs and then we figure out what to do with the songs, as opposed to insisting that they're just me. Right. So therefore it didn't matter. It wasn't me playing guitar. It wasn't me singing. It wasn't, me doing anything. And that really opened the whole thing up. And right after that, things started clicking. Like, I started working with people suddenly. And I think it's because I just opened myself up to doing that. And I was so used to I'm going to be in control of everything. I'm going to play everything. Right. So, and that was a big change, and it went well, I think. So
the band that's on the album is, all right. So you've got Mark Patterson, who's played with Sunvolt, Robert Earl Keen, Billy Joe Shaver, Kate Wakefield, who is from Cincinnati, plays in a really interesting band that I found out called Lung. It's just her on cello and a drummer.
Yes.
And she's singing. So who else is on the album?
So Todd Widener, who's from Shrug. So he's also from Dayton, but out in California now. So he's a fantastic songwriter and guitar player. Crazy Joe Trichler, who is a rockabilly guitar player.
Crazy Joe is awesome.
Yeah. He has toured across the country and in Europe with a lot of like the older rockabilly guys, backing up like the Collins Kids, and then newer people like Deke Dickerson and people like Deke. That. Yeah. And then, he was Deke's guitar player for a while.
That's awesome.
And then Patrick Himes, who was another Daytonian who ran a studio in Nashville called Real Love Recording Studios, and he moved that back to Dayton. And then we decided to get together and record. So he had a lot of experience working with songwriters in Nashville. Mark had years and years of experience working with songwriters in Austin. And so he was able to help with arrangements and kind of coaching me on that. Kate is not only a amazing singer, but a fantastic cello player and a tremendous songwriter. And of course, Patrick is a great player. He played bass and keyboards on the record. And both Todd and Joe are just amazing, and they brought an entirely different perspective. I would demo the songs, and then they would just use that as kind of their reference point, and they would come in and do what they thought. And we just we really opened it up to, like, the way it worked is Mark and I would arrange the songs. So Mark would help me improve and tighten the arrangements and make them, just bring a lot of things that, was learning. It was a learning process for me. Todd and Joe would bring in these new textures, right? Okay. Patrick would not only keep an eye on the recording, right, but he would also, he would play bass, and he would add these new keyboard textures that we weren't thinking at all. And then Kate came in and sang and played cello and just really kind of took these songs to a whole other level that I would say, it was well beyond what I was thinking when we brought them into the studio. It really transformed them, and I think made just a huge difference on the album.
Not everybody knew each other at this point, right? You're just picking. Are you just picking people to work with? Like, and are you file sharing? Because it looks like Mark is in Austin. Kate's in Cincinnati. Other people are also. How did you get everybody together? And was it all recorded together in the studio, or was it just together?
Yeah, good question. So the way that it would work is that I would do demos at home, and we would share the demos, because what was happening, we essentially recorded let's just say 3 months. Every 3 months we record. Okay. And because what was happening is Mark was touring and Kate was touring. Kate's on the road for most of the year.
Oh, okay.
And so Mark was on the road more and more and more with Sunvolt.
Yeah.
So what we would do is Mark and I would get together, usually with Todd or Joe, and we would record the backing tracks, and then we would book a session for Kate. And sometimes that would be the next day, and sometimes that would be the next month.
Oh, wow.
And then we'd have a follow-up session to do bass and keyboard. So would have loved to have done it live in the studio, but that wasn't possible. And this worked well. And a lot of it, I would have to say, is the just amazing talent of everyone who played on the record. And I would say, especially Mark, because he just was so good at capturing the right feel, and it just comes through on the recordings, and it helped everybody do a great performance. So
it's amazing because it sounds like everybody's together playing in the studio, like a standard session.
Yeah, and a lot of that, would also have to give credit to Patrick. Patrick Himes is a tremendous producer and engineer, and he just does such a great job of capturing the room and the vibe that when we ended up doing the overdubs and all those things, everything just kind of fit in really easily. And the mixes, and obviously, like, I'm not going to say, it was easy to mix, but it was but everything was laid out really well. And he has such a talent for doing that.
And with this album, you'd mentioned this is one of the first times you had other people collaborating with you on the songwriting process. So did many of the songs change a lot throughout that process with people adding things? Were there songs that just completely changed from what you thought they were going to be to what they ended up being?
So yes, although I would do I guess I would do pretty tight demos.
Okay. But
then when I would work with Mark, he would just develop the arrangements so much, right? So like you hear some of the songs, there's a song on there called Slipping Away that has these tags at the end. And that was all Mark.
I feel you slipping away from me. I feel you slipping.
Because when I had the song, we decided, what if we approach this like a Roy Orbison song? And we did that again. We did a Lucinda Williams cover, but we played it, called Am I Too Blue? But we played it like we were playing In Dreams by Roy Orbison. And Mark drove a lot of those ideas and approaches to how we did it. So that would start to change the song. And then we'd go in with the demos and the guitar parts and my scratch vocals. And Todd and later Joe, because he came in later, they would play and they would introduce all new parts and they would just develop the song so much more. So then you'd have Patrick, who's going to play a really great tasteful bass line and these keyboard parts that he would sprinkle in that would add new textures to it that weren't in the songs. Okay. And then finally Kate would come in and it would just develop all of the melody lines. They would just become so much more than they were. Yeah. And all of the backing vocals would just, create both the sort of like dynamic in the song, but also these textures, right? She also came in and played cello. And there's a number of songs where then that adds this level of intensity to the song. It's kind of the approach we were taking. Okay. So there's places where you have Hammond B3 organ and cello pushing against each other, like up against the lead guitar lines that Joe would play. And that was the sort of thing I really enjoyed doing. And I think to your question, that's the sort of development that happened. Okay. Like the songs just evolved, and to me, it felt like we were putting in months and months on the songs because everybody was bringing so much into them. And that was amazing. It was an amazing experience.
So they didn't really change so much as grow and evolve then.
Yeah, I think so, because we wouldn't necessarily move a chorus, right? Like Mark and I would really sit down and really focus and make sure it was good. But having Mark there meant that the arrangements of the songs would mature, right? Yeah. Like sometimes you get I've gone in the studio and afterwards I'm like, oh, we could have done this, or we could have done that. Maybe we should re-record it. In this case, we did a lot of that work, and that would basically be him coming in from a tour, getting together with me, and then heading out, and we did the same thing with Kate, and we caught everyone else where we could, and just ran in there, and everyone was just so great about it. It was, like I said, it was an amazing experience. I'm really just so grateful for it.
Well, you mentioned some of your earlier bands, doing a lot of punk and surf and alternative sounding music. But this album doesn't sound anything like that, except for maybe one or two little tracks where I can hear a little bit of the influence. But you mentioned your quote here. You said Graham Parsons and Roy Orbison are both strong influences, and they had such a powerful way of conveying sadness in their songs. And you wanted to not copy but honor them. This album, it's a completely different step from what you were doing. So. Was it that you wanted to explore sadness, or did something? It's a mature sounding album. It's not a punk album or a surf album. It's a grown up, mature album. Was that?
Well, thank you.
Was that an intentional shift, or is that just your songwriting changing over the years?
Well, it definitely was the songwriting changing, but it was an intentional challenge for me to say, okay, I've written like this thing and this thing. I really would like to push myself. I would like to write something more. And what does that make me think of? Like, what do I aspire to? Right. Okay. And so I started thinking about people like Graham Parsons and Roy Orbison, but also like people like Nico Case, and people who kind of really explored, sadness was a big one. Well, like I just landed on that theme. Probably, I think maybe I had some lyrics that sort of suggested that. And then, you think of Graham Parsons and you think of Roy and then some of the things that Nico Case and other, songwriters explore. And so at some point you just decide to kind of go in a direction. And it turned out to be a good direction to go in, right? Because as I got into it more, I also worked on not just being, well, I kind of felt before, which is just like, I'll just sing it from the gut and just like, blah, whatever it is. I was like, let me really spend some time and work on this because I'm not in a band setting. I don't have like a deadline. Yeah. I have a challenge. I've been in, like I said, I was inspired by what Paige was working on. And then shortly after that, I met Mark and, and he started telling me about his experiences in Austin. It was just fascinating. Right. So, so those sort of things became the fuel. And it was just like, I think the biggest thing was just challenging myself to do something. Okay. Don't just do what you're doing. Do something different,
Explore, change, grow.
Explore. Yeah. See where you go. Maybe you end up in a good spot.
Yeah. So. Well, to me, you did because I absolutely love the album. And
thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I'm really glad that I pushed myself to do it, and I'm just really glad that I got to work with everybody and that they were so generous,
Oh, such a cool group of people you worked with too. I mean, I try to get familiar with some of their work, and especially Kate. I mean, Lung is just interesting. They're a crazy duo.
Yeah, they're a fantastic band. They've got great songs. They have an amazing live show. It's incredible.
I saw a few live clips. Yeah.
She also writes and releases records on her own as well. So she's got several records on Bandcamp that are fantastic, and they are very different than Lung. So cool. They're a little more atmospheric, a little more pop. There's really great songs, and then Lung is more rockin' and darker. Yeah.
Which you don't think of when you hear cello and drums, but it really
not until
is.
You hear that. Yeah. Not until you hear that.
Now you mentioned the Listen to Williams cover that you did, Am I Too Blue? You also do Tom Waits's Take It With Me, and I want to let you know right now, my wife absolutely loves your Listen to Williams cover. That's one of her favorite tracks. Awesome. Yeah, it's one of her favorite tracks on the album. She absolutely loved that.
Oh, thanks. That's cool. That's really cool.
Is the night too black? Is the wind too rough? Is it at your back? Have you had enough? Do you miss my touch?
How did you choose those two songs? Is there any reason behind it?
So Mark and it's funny you asked this because I was just thinking about this. Mark and I just had this idea that it might be cool to have an album or to have a cover on the album, and it had been suggested also by Scott Kinnison who runs Atom Records, who has been putting out records for me for many years now, and he threw it out there just for me to think about, right? And then I tossed the idea to Mark, and he was like, if we found something that really fit And also it has to be, thematically would fit. Yeah. And then also has to be something that we can do something with, and so we went through, and I can't remember what they were. We went through at least a dozen songs.
Oh, wow.
And Mark was like, no, this is not, this isn't going to work, and finally we came across, each one, those two were separate, but, when we hit them, all of a sudden we got the Lucinda song. It was like, oh, what if we did this like Roy Orbison? Yeah. Right. And it wouldn't be like her at all. And he was going to play a show with her. He was on the same bill with her, like, wow. Like a couple months later or whatever.
Wow.
And then a little bit later, I just started thinking it would be interesting to see, like, I thought about a lot of those Tom Waits ballads from all the years. Right.
Yeah.
And how he always had this interesting, rhythm and sense. And a friend of mine does a number of Tom Waits songs, and she's just, does a great versions of them. And so I came across that one. I didn't even really, until I stumbled across it accidentally.
Oh, wow.
And I thought it was a good, like, sort of breath, like taking a breath.
Yeah.
Whereas the Lucinda Williams fits more tightly in the theme. This other one, we put it at the end of the album because it's just kind of like a breath. It's sad, but it's melancholy.
Yeah.
And and of course his version is all really rough. The rhythm is really rough and all that stuff. Yeah. But and I thought, if we kind of don't do too much to this, because a couple other people have covered it and it was very clean and sounded very pretty. I'm like, I don't want to do that. So we'll keep the arrangement sort of low key, and there's pump organ and guitars on it, Okay. But we resisted the idea of like being too elaborate with it and just kind of let it be simple,
Yeah. Well,
so I'm so glad we did it. That was new for me too. That was really new for me to do something like that.
Yeah. If you made it too elaborate, it wouldn't have really fit with the sound of the album either. So it's
right. Yeah, that's true.
I think you did a wonderful version of it. It incredibly tasteful and incredibly fitting for the album. And it's a great way to close it. It really is.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that.
How hard is it to sequence an album like that then? If the theme is kind of exploring sadness and in a sense, is it difficult to sequence it so it's not a complete bummer?
Right. Yes, it is. So that, now I love sequencing. I love it. I try to do it for my friends' records. Some of them take me up on it. Some of them don't. I give them the sequences and then they're like, yes. Or some of them just like, yeah, no way.
Thanks for trying.
But it gives them, I hope it at least gives them something to think about, So but I really like sequencing. And so I did so many sequences for this record and just kept playing with it. Kind of I think really what you were saying is like, how do you get it to flow?
Yeah.
So the thing is that I'll just say, and people can disagree with it when they hear it, is that it's a 55-minute album.
Yeah.
And I don't think it feels like it when you listen to it. And I knew I had the right sequence when it I didn't feel like I was getting jammed up with anything that was too much of a downer or in a certain way. Cause obviously there's some similar things in the songs, or sound wise, right? All of those things that go into it. It's really fun. It was really fun to sequence. It got me out of my head for a little bit about the songs, but it was, but I think it turns out that it doesn't feel like a really long album.
No, it doesn't. Not at all.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
It flows perfectly. I was listening to it again last night, and my wife was watching TV, and I had the headphones on. I'm writing notes down and listening to it, and next thing I know, it's coming towards the end. And my wife's whatever show she was watching, some Real Housewives or Below Deck thing she was watching, was wrapping up. I'm like,
wow.
No, man, this just flew by. This is great.
Where'd the time go?
Yeah, exactly. And you do have songs that kind of break it up, like Trail of Tears. It's a great track. I hear a little bit of maybe the Mulchman surf influence in that song.
Cruel words are spoken, drinks get spilled, and I'm back on the road again. Walking down this trail of tears, a heartbreak on every path. No matter where I go, every love I know keeps on leading me back. The first time that I saw you,
Was that intentional because of writing so many songs that were a little slower, a little sad thematically, or was it just you've been writing surf music for how long now? It's hard not to.
It's funny because there are those things that pop out there. They do, because like they're just your little they're just part of you, right?
Yeah.
And I can go back and hear songs, like old songs of mine. I'm like, oh wow, you can tell it's me, I guess. Yeah. It's funny because we have that song, and we had the other one, Fading Away, which comes right after it.
Yeah.
And those were two like more rootsy songs, and they're more punchy songs. And we put those at the end of the record because we wanted the album to have kind of like a little upswing, right? Like before the end. So you kind of had a big wrap up feeling.
Okay.
And then the Tom Waits one is the actual like coda or whatever. But one thing I made sure of when I was doing it is like, I was concerned that it might sound too surfy. So I was like, okay, there's no way I'm playing any guitar on it. Like I'm not going to play it. Todd's going to play it. Let's see what his take is on it, because it'll be different. And he kind of took it slightly different. I think if I had played the guitar on that song, and I play guitar on some of the songs, but that it might have sounded more surfy. So, but yeah, the vibe though is still going to kind of come through, the surf rockabilly vibe.
Yeah, I love it. And so some of this. All right, so I'm going to tell you some of my favorites. I mean, the beginning, actually, that song played at the beginning sets a great tone. And, coincidentally, the beginning is the first track, but it's one of the best tracks on the album, and it sets a fantastic tone. It's I love it. After You're Gone. In fact, the solo at the end, that guitar piece at the end is, I love that. The tone on the guitar is fantastic.
So that's Todd that's playing the lead on that song, which is actually going to be our next video.
Oh, cool!
Since you mentioned it, so and he plays on that, and then there's a layer. Kate plays cello right under that to sort of like lift that guitar solo up. And I remember when we came up with that whole like chord sequence and all of that, I thought it was almost this like little slightly spaghetti westernish type of thing that we had put into this song. And I was like, what? And there was a lot of that on the record. Like even the Trail of Tears was one of those things where we said, as I was writing, I didn't shy away from going there.
Okay.
Because it was like, well, what will happen? Yeah. What would happen if we went there? Right. And so that was one of those cases where we did it. And I thank you for saying that, because I was, really happy with what Todd put together on that song. It has blistering guitar through the whole thing. And then that last solo, and Brendan Barry, that did our video for that, put together some nice sequence of images that fit into his playing really well. Okay. So it's like stuff like that. It's like, it opens up opportunities that you wouldn't get. I've never, I guess it's so funny because for years I've just kept such tight control of what I'm doing. But what I really like is just being the ringleader.
Oh, see, there you go. So this album's been great for you.
I'm the facilitator. Yeah. It's been I've learned a lot about like how I can work with people and what we can do together and like what I can bring to the table. Yeah. So it's like, and it all started with me saying, I don't sing that well. And I'm not saying I can't sing. I'm just saying, it's like I feel limited, or I feel limited in this context. What happens if I let go? And that just led to a whole, like everything that happened. Just to let you know, the beginning, which is the beginning of the album, that was the first song we recorded.
Oh my gosh!
And we did that essentially to see if the whole project, could we do this? It was basically the prototype, and we recorded it. And I was so happy with what Mark did. And I was so surprised by what Todd did, because it was very different than what I brought. He did these steel guitar type of things on the record.
Yeah.
And then Patrick added these, Hammond B3 on it. And that wasn't expected either. But I was not prepared for what Kate was going to do. It was like, it went so far beyond what I was thinking. And that when we did it, I knew all of those other songs. I knew we could do all of the other songs. I knew it was going to happen. And it was just a matter of getting it together and planning it. So yeah, that was a great moment.
And it's a wonderful, wonderful beginning to the album. And like I mentioned before, the album's great. It's a mature album. It's something I can put on in the car when I've got the kids on. Now, my kids are teenagers still right now, but
yeah, mine too.
I don't want to play them, I don't know, Rage Against the Machine or Tool. I don't want to put on things with questionable lyrics and maybe something that's a little heavier than I'm comfortable, playing for them. So this is a great, and it's great. I can put it on for my dad, and he loves it. So it's it's a very
good for kids and dads.
It is. It's great.
And grandpas.
It's great. It's a good grandpa and kid album. Actually, it's a great all around. It's a wonderful album for anybody. You don't have to worry about playing it for people. I guess is the best, because you put on a lot of people I'll have on this show. I've got to be careful. is this person gonna like this? If I play this for somebody, I don't know, lyrically, musically, it might not be the style. The Distance is an album that I can honestly put on for anybody.
Well, hey, and I think anybody and everybody should hear it, right?
I think everybody should buy it.
I do. Yes, me too. But I have had many people tell me that it was, a sad album for them to listen to. And it's like, that's the prevailing theme on it. And it was really interesting to explore that and to just go there and just try to, figure out how to communicate some of that stuff. And I've gotten a lot of good responses to it. And that's a great feeling. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I appreciate you saying that. I really do.
See, now the album artwork, it's so beautiful. How did you decide on what to do with the artwork? Who did it?
Okay, I can tell you. So, my friend Rachel Botting, she's a designer and artist here in Dayton, Ohio. Okay. I've known her for years. She does beautiful work. And I went to her and I gave her the album.
Okay.
That was it. I gave her no direction whatsoever. Wow. And that's what she came back with, was the red mist and the drying, deteriorating flowers and the overwhelming red. Yeah. That's what she came back with. So that was her vision for it. And I was just so blown away. So she did posters. She did, the album cover. I wish we could have done an LP after I saw the artwork. Right?
Yeah, no kidding.
But it's just not, it's not going to happen.
No.
But Rachel is she's a tremendous artist and tremendous designer. And I was just thrilled. And I'm really happy with how it turned out. She spent so much time on it to make sure it turned out right.
It's absolutely beautiful. It's stunning artwork. I absolutely love it. And it ties into the feeling of the album. So and that was kind of the question. I was wondering if that was intentional or if it was a piece that you had found. So
No, it was intentional from her perspective. It was her take on the entire album. So I know she listened to it a bunch of times and then she started going to work and brought it back. And I was like, absolutely.
Yeah.
I just knew it. I saw it and I'm like, I knew it.
See, that's great because a lot of times, and I'm sure you've had experience with this where you'll get a design back. You're like, well, close, but I'm looking for more of this, this or that. And
right.
to have somebody nail it immediately, that's unusual.
Yeah. It was just like she had it all the way. So the only thing we worried about was like the liner notes or whatever, getting those right. But like in terms of the overall layout and the, what was happening on there. Yeah. She just nailed it.
That's amazing.
It was cool.
So now the coronavirus has really screwed with a lot of people, a lot of touring, a lot of record releases and stuff like that. Has that messed up anything for you? Were you planning on playing live a lot and to support the album, or has it changed what you've had to do to support the album?
Let's see. So we have actually been moving at a pretty slow pace, just out of necessity.
Yeah.
Part of that is my job and family. So I had a couple of shows planned, and those fell through. But I'm not hitting the road, so I didn't get into that. So for Mark Patterson and Kate Wakefield, they both tour all the time.
Yeah.
So they were definitely affected. So, but for, and Joe and Todd, Patrick tours a little bit. Joe and Todd aren't doing that right now, but they do play, right? So they were affected. So we did a release show, and we also have been working, to promote the record. So I think that's probably the challenge we have right now is, as we're promoting the record, our magazines, are they doing reviews? Are their writers still employed? Are they going to press and things like that? And we're just kind of finding our way and trying to make sure that we're not like, setting expectations incorrectly, or, we're just trying to do the best we can.
Yeah.
And I would say in general, like, I'll play we'll play it sometime.
Yeah.
We'll get there. I'm not on the road anymore, these days. And I really look at opportunities that come up, right? It's like if shows come up or, the opportunity to go somewhere, like I just kind of go with what makes sense. So we're doing okay as far as that goes. I have a lot of friends who are hit really hard with this. Yeah. So, and I don't know. I mean, they're all coming up with different ideas and things they can do.
Yeah.
But it's,
I've seen a lot of live streaming and stuff like that happening.
Yeah. So. Well, live streaming. So, and putting out songs, and things like that. So,
yeah. I've seen a lot of people, putting, I guess it would be early versions of songs or stripped down versions of songs online, doing kind of almost like what you did with this album, challenging yourself. But the challenge is like write a song every day, and until they're out of quarantine or whatever it is. So it's really changed a lot of people's plans. So it's I'm glad it's not really impacting you in a way that you can't recover from, because I know it's doing that to a lot of people.
Yeah. And that's because, I don't depend on the traveling, right now that's like something that, so that's, I guess I'm lucky there. Is it going to slow us down getting the word out about the record? Probably. Yeah. Cause there's so much more to worry about now, that is more important. And you almost feel like, oh, should I really be pushing this? But then again, I want everybody, all the people I know that are playing, I want them to be pushing their stuff and letting people know. And we also, we want to be able to move forward too. I guess if I hadn't just done the record, maybe I would be doing a song a day or something like that too. But this, I'm happy to still, we'll share some of the live videos and things like that and let people know about it and all that. And I'm trying to also get the word out about other groups I know about and things like that too.
Well, I think it's actually a great time to be putting music out, because like for me, for instance, I was in quarantine for 2 weeks, and then in the middle of that, my job decided, well, we're going to split our employment in half. Half the staff is going in for 2 weeks, then the other half will go in the 2 weeks following, and we'll just rotate. So I've had 3 weeks of being at my house, not being able to go out and doing anything. So listening to new music is one of the few things I can do at the house and not have to wait.
And then I sent you the record, so it's perfect timing.
It was great. So I think maybe this is just a great time to be releasing. It's helping relieve some stress for people stuck at their houses.
I think that's a really good point right there. It is a stress release, It's like being creative and communicating with people. It's important. Yeah. So, and we all have to figure out the right way to do it,
Yep.
I'm really lucky. I have my job and I'm working, and I'm at home, and it's like, we just do the best we can to kind of figure out how to take care of ourselves and take care of each other.
Exactly. Yeah. So how did you choose the name The Distance for the album?
So The Distance was it was the name of a song on the record, right? So it was just the idea that was the only thing left between people when their relationship fell apart.
Yeah.
And when I was choosing the names of the record, like I just had this kind of thing where I was just thinking it should be the name of a song.
Okay.
Right. Like it should be the name. Like I couldn't think of it like popping out at a sort of an umbrella title, it was like, it just wasn't working. Like I was trying things and just didn't sound good. So I went through, I was doing my playlist in iTunes, and I would title it, and I would be like, the record's called The Beginning. Yeah. The record's called After You're Gone. The record's called, and The Distance is the one that stuck. Although I remember when I was working with Rachel on it, on the art that I started to have like a panic attack and thinking I had to change the name of the record, but I couldn't think of but I've gone through every song. It doesn't work. It's not going to be Tell Me Tomorrow. That sounds silly.
Yeah. And you can't title it after one of the covers.
And you can't do the covers because that gets all messed up.
Yeah.
And, but The Distance just felt really good. I mean, I don't know. I hope it resonates with people. I've said, I hope that makes sense. Yeah. I put the song in a certain place on the album, and that was part of the thing. Like, that's just all my weird sequencing brain, that nobody appreciates, but it's just like where I just enjoy that, and I'm like, what's called The Distance, and The Distance is a third song. And then you go to the cleanup song, which is, the batting cleanup. It's like, it's all that weird stuff. But yeah, but that song, it was one of the last songs we recorded. And it's one of the ones I've gotten the most feedback about in terms of like, the words and stuff, kind of like people connecting with it. And which is, like I said, that's a great feeling when, I'm sorry, because they're bummers. Yeah. but it's a nice feeling.
Well, even whether you're connecting,
nice to hear that.
Yeah. Whether you're connecting with a happy song or a bummed out, a bummer of a song, you're still connecting with people. Next album is going to be all really happy, uplifting songs. So, Mark, it's not. It's totally not. It's going to be dark. It's going to be darker than this one. There you go. You're going to be using, old Les Pauls tuned down.
Yeah, it's going to be really low.
Yeah,
just low rock. Yeah.
Is there a social media presence for you guys where people can find out what you guys are doing once everything's freed up a little bit?
Yeah. So there's, I'll throw each one out. You can tell me which one works. So Facebook is a good one, right? So you can find, Nick Kizirnis on Facebook, and that's got all the latest and greatest.
Okay.
We're also on the other ones, there's the Twitters and the Instagrams, but I do think that's a really good place. And then I have a site also. It's NickKizirnis.com, and I keep that updated with, the basic information, but the, late breaking stuff ends up on Facebook and Instagram. Okay. And that's where the video we'll promote the new video when it comes out. We'll promote the old video. We'll do a bunch of stuff like that.
Where can people buy the album? How can they find it?
So right now you can get it from Bandcamp. Okay. So Bandcamp is, I love Bandcamp, right? Yeah. So you go to Bandcamp and search for either Atom Records, ATOM, or Nick Kizirnis, and you will find it for sure. You can also go to atomrecords.com. And then over spring, it'll start, like the distributor picks it up and it'll start showing up in other places. So yes, it will be on Spotify. That'll be coming, very soon. So
awesome. Well, I've kept you for almost an hour now, man. Thank you.
It's great to talk with you.
Oh, same here. I'm really glad I was able to learn a little bit more about how you came to create this really, really wonderful album. I absolutely love it.
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks, Mark. I really appreciate it.
You'll come back even though you keep late.